You're trying to lead people, but you're stuck managing tasks. And that's why everything in your life feels heavier than it should. Your team doesn't listen. Your goals keep slipping. Your days feel reactive instead of decisive. And here's the part most people never hear: managing more will not fix it. In fact, it'll make things worse. I learned that the hard way on a quiet morning in Afghanistan when a single moment of managing almost got my entire team killed. And the solution I discovered that day is the opposite of what every leadership book teaches. It's something only someone from the teams would ever understand. By the end of this, you're going to know the exact mental shift that turned a near disaster into one of the most defining moments of my life. But before we go any further, you need to prove you're actually here to change. Put your phone face down, turn off your notifications, close every other app. If you can't give me your full attention for the next few minutes, click off now. This is your first test. And if you fail this one, you won't make it through the rest. I'm ex-Navy SEAL John. I spent over a decade in the world's most elite special operations force. My job wasn't to motivate people, it was to prepare them for missions where hesitation meant someone didn't come home. And what I'm about to teach you has nothing to do with inspirational quotes or self-help fluff. This is the exact principle that separated life from death on deployments, and it works just as powerfully in civilian life. Whether you're leading a business team, running a household, or just trying to get your own habits under control. In the teams, we called it mission readiness. Out here, you'd call it goal achievement. And I'm going to make you a promise right now. If you apply what I'm about to teach for just 7 days, you will feel more control, more clarity, and more confidence than you've had in years. 7 days. That's it. Here's what you're about to learn. This strategy has 3 steps, simple, but not easy. First, I'm going to show you the exact moment management failed me in the field and how leadership took its place. Second, you'll learn the mental framework I used to regain clarity when everything fell apart. And third, I'll give you the civilian translation, the exact way to apply this today in your own life with what I call a zero fog command structure. If you're serious about stepping up, I need you to say it in the comments. I'm ready for the mission. Now lock in, because the moment everything changed for me didn't start with gunfire. It started with silence. The first cracks never show up as explosions or alarms. They appear quietly, almost politely, like they're trying not to bother you. That morning, as the sun pushed its first thin line of light over the ridge, I felt something I'd learned to recognize far too late in my career: hesitation. Not dramatic, not obvious, just a half-second pause in someone's movement, a delay in a response, a glance that lingered a little too long. That's all it takes. Most people think collapse comes from big failures, but in the teams we knew better. Collapse comes from the tiny moments you ignore. We were preparing for a simple reconnaissance run, nothing high heat, nothing we hadn't done 100 times. And maybe that's why no one said anything when the atmosphere felt off. The jokes were quieter. The gear checks weren't as sharp. One of the guys, Ramirez, kept readjusting his radio antenna like he didn't trust the comms. Another, Mills, asked me to repeat an instruction he never needed repeated. Little things. But in our world, little things are the loudest warnings. When you're managing instead of leading, you miss those warnings. Managers look at the plan, leaders look at the people. And that morning, I was managing. I was checking boxes, running protocol, making sure every step of the mission outline was completed, but I wasn't leading the humans who had to execute it. That's the trap most people fall into. They think success comes from having a perfect plan. It doesn't. Success comes from having a team that can adapt when the plan doesn't survive contact with reality, and reality never cooperates. As we began moving toward the target area, communication started getting muddy, not broken, just blurred. I'd give an instruction and 2 guys would respond at once, or no one would respond, or someone would move before I gave the signal. That inconsistency is deadly. When you're operating under pressure, whether it's a battlefield or a boardroom, unclear communication doesn't slow things down, it accelerates disaster. I kept telling myself it was fine, that it was just early morning stiffness, or guys still warming up, or a simple off day. That's what managers do. They rationalize, they hope problems solve themselves. They assume people will correct their own course if you just keep the machine running. That lie has cost more lives than any enemy. Tension began to build in the air like static electricity. You can feel it physically when a team starts slipping out of sync. Their breathing rhythms don't match. Their pacing doesn't line up. Movements stop being fluid and start being mechanical. It's like watching gears grind instead of glide. You don't hear the breakdown, but you feel it in your bones. There was a moment, small, forgettable to anyone else, when the universe practically grabbed me by the collar. Mills turned and whispered, "What's the actual play here, John?" His voice wasn't scared. It was uncertain, and uncertainty is a virus. If one man questions, everyone will question. If one man hesitates, everyone will feel his hesitation in their own chest. That's when it hit me. I had been managing the mission, not leading the men. I was focused on the checklist, the protocol, the process. But leadership isn't about process. Leadership is about clarity. And right then, our clarity was dissolving. You don't lose control all at once. You lose it one silent miscommunication at a time. One missed cue, one unclear signal, one moment where people start looking at each other instead of looking at you. The collapse always starts quietly. The danger always whispers before it screams. And that morning, the whisper was getting louder. Chaos doesn't announce itself with a roar. It arrives in a single moment that feels wrong, then becomes 1,000 moments you can't control. For us, it happened when the ridge ahead of us lit up with movement we weren't expecting. 1 second, the world was still. The next, everything was shifting shapes and shadows, fast, aggressive, unpredictable. We weren't where we were supposed to be, and neither were they. And instantly, every small hesitation from earlier slammed into me like a freight train. This was the moment where clarity mattered, and we didn't have any. The first burst of gunfire cracked through the air, not aimed at us, but close enough to tell me we had walked into someone else's plan. That's when confusion hit the team like a wave. Two guys dropped into cover on the wrong side of a rock formation. One guy didn't move at all, frozen, waiting for someone to tell him what to do. Another started calling out positions that contradicted what I could see with my own eyes. It didn't feel like a SEAL team. It felt like a group of men acting individually, each one clutching their own small piece of information, terrified to take initiative. That's what happens when you manage people instead of leading them. In a crisis, they default to fear. They wait, they hesitate, they hope someone else will make the first move, and the clock doesn't stop for hesitation. Every second of confusion tightens the noose. I felt the shift in myself too. For a split second, the pressure slammed into me. My brain tried to process everything at once. The terrain, the angles, the enemy movement, the guys falling out of rhythm. You'd think a decade of training makes you immune to panic. It doesn't. It teaches you how to see the moment panic shows up and kill it before it grows. That's the psychological divide. Followers panic first, think second, and act last. Leaders think first, act second, and never give panic room to breathe. The switch flipped for me when I realized something simple but brutal. No one was coming to save us. No higher command, no reinforcement, no magical moment of clarity. If I didn't take control right then, confusion was going to do the enemy's job for them. Leadership happens in a single decision, sometimes a loud one, sometimes a silent one. Mine was silent. I inhaled once, slow and steady, the way we're trained when everything is falling apart, and I told myself something I'd repeated in training but never felt so deeply until that moment. You are the calm in the chaos. Everything slowed down. Not because the situation improved, but because I accepted the weight of it. I stopped thinking about the plan we'd built and focused on the men standing in front of me. Leadership is human. You lead people, not missions. I moved first, fast, decisive, purposeful. I dropped behind the correct cover and shouted one command, not 10, one direction, not a list. That's when the psychology shifted for the team. Humans mirror clarity, they follow certainty, they sync with confidence. The moment I simplified the situation, every man aligned with it. Their movements sharpened, their breathing synced, communication clicked back into place, not because the danger was gone, but because leadership had returned to the room. Under fire, you learn the truth. Managing tasks scatters people. Leading humans unifies them, and that unity is the only thing that keeps chaos from swallowing you whole. That was the moment I understood something I still teach today. In crisis, people don't rise to the level of the plan. They fall to the level of the leader, and I knew right then, the next move had to be mine. The moment I stepped into cover, everything inside me shifted from reacting to commanding, not in the loud, chest-thumping way Hollywood likes to show, but in the silent, precise way leadership actually feels when lives are on the line. My breathing leveled out. My vision narrowed into clarity. The noise didn't disappear, gunfire, radio static, boots dragging against dirt, but it stopped owning me. I owned the moment. And when a leader owns the moment, the team feels it immediately. I issued 2 short commands, not explanations, not suggestions, commands. One to reposition the left flank, one to tighten the comms discipline. The words weren't special, but the conviction behind them was. There's a tone your voice takes on when you've accepted full responsibility for whatever happens next. It cuts through chaos like a blade. The team snapped back into motion, not perfect, but unified enough to start pulling the situation back from the edge. But clarity doesn't erase danger. It only gives you a fighting chance. As we shifted positions, a sudden burst of enemy fire pinned down our right side. I heard Ramirez curse under his breath, a rare crack in the confidence of one of our most reliable guys. Mills called out a distance that didn't match what I was seeing. Another guy almost moved into a blind spot because he misread a shadow as cover. Mistakes under pressure aren't just mistakes, they're dominoes. One falls, the rest follow. And I could feel those dominoes starting to tilt. This was the part of leadership no one talks about: the discomfort, the responsibility, the weight. It's not inspiring, it's not motivational, it's suffocating. You confront the terrifying truth that if anything goes wrong, it's because your leadership wasn't strong enough to prevent it. And in that suffocating space, you make your next move. I crawled forward to get a clearer angle, exposing myself just enough to see the real layout of the threat. Two enemy fighters had flanked farther than we anticipated. If they pushed just a few more meters, they'd cut us off completely. I had seconds, maybe less, before we lost control again. The smart move, the safe move, would have been to pull the team back and reset. But leadership isn't built on what's safe. Leadership is built in the moments where every option carries a risk, and you choose the one that protects the people counting on you. I made the call. I told the team to hold position and provide suppressive fire while I moved to redirect our angle. No one argued, no one hesitated. That's the power of owning the moment. Your team trusts you even when you're moving straight into discomfort. I could feel the heat of rounds snapping past as I pushed forward. I could feel the tension in every muscle, every joint, every instinct. But leadership demands you act before fear convinces you not to. When I reached the new position, the situation came into focus like a lens snapping into place. The enemy wasn't as coordinated as they looked. They were rushing, trying to overwhelm us with noise and speed. They weren't leading each other, they were reacting to us. That gave us an opening. I signaled the team, short, sharp, unmistakable. We shifted our fire. We cut off the enemy's advance. The tide didn't fully turn, but it paused just long enough for us to breathe, just long enough for me to see the next threat and realize the battle wasn't over. Leadership doesn't end when you take back control. Leadership ends when the danger stops moving. And in that moment, as another shadow broke across the ridge and a new problem revealed itself, I knew we were nowhere near done. The real turning point didn't come from firepower, angles, or tactics. It came from something far less visible and far more powerful: alignment. There's a moment in every chaotic situation where the team either fractures completely or snaps into unity so tight you can feel it in your bones. For us, that moment came right after we halted the enemy's advance. It wasn't victory, it wasn't safety, it was clarity, pure, sharp, undeniable clarity. And that's when everything changed. I remember looking back at my guys, each one breathing hard, covered in dust, eyes wide with adrenaline, and something clicked. The hesitation was gone, the uncertainty was gone, the noise was gone. They weren't waiting for direction anymore. They were reading the environment, reading each other, reading me. That's the moment you stop managing a group of individuals and start leading a team. What caused the shift? It wasn't magic, it was mindset. Leadership lives in mindset long before it ever shows up in action. Every SEAL learns that the real battlefield isn't physical, it's mental. And that morning, under pressure, I had to pull every mental framework I had ever learned to the surface. The first was focus, not the kind of focus people talk about in productivity books. I mean, battlefield focus, the ability to block out everything except the next essential action, not the next 10 steps, not the worst case scenario, just the next move. When I locked into that level of focus, the team mirrored it. Focus is contagious, chaos is too. The leader decides which one spreads. The second was extreme ownership. In the teams, you don't blame, you don't excuse, you don't wait for someone else to fix the problem. You take responsibility for everything: your decisions, your mistakes, your team's behavior, the outcome. The moment I assumed full responsibility for the situation, the men felt it. And when they saw me carrying the weight, they lifted theirs. Then came the 40% rule, the idea that when your mind tells you you're done, you're only at 40% of your actual capacity. Under fire, fatigue hits fast. Not just physical fatigue, mental, emotional, psychological fatigue. The voice in your head starts whispering that it's too much, too fast, too intense. But SEALs are trained to push past that voice, to recognize it, confront it, and keep moving. When that rule kicked in for me, my team instinctively followed. They pushed harder, steadier, with a confidence that only shows up when people see their leader refusing to break. But the most important framework was eliminating emotional noise: fear, frustration, anger, doubt. Those emotions slow reaction time, cloud judgment, and create hesitation. Leadership requires you to feel those emotions without letting them influence your decisions. You acknowledge them, then step past them. When I shut down the emotional noise and communicated with pure clarity, the team synced instantly. These principles aren't just for battlefields. Civilians face chaos every day. A failing project, a team falling apart, a family under pressure, a goal you keep putting off. The frameworks are the same. Focus on the next essential action. Take full ownership of the outcome. Push past the mental wall at 40%. Eliminate the emotional noise. When you do that, people follow you, not because they're told to, but because clarity pulls them in. That's the real breakthrough. That's when management dies and leadership is born. And just when everything finally came together, when the team moved as one and the mission sharpened into total clarity, I saw the moment that would test all of it, the moment that would decide everything. When the dust finally settled, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like exhale, long, slow, and heavy, the kind of exhale your body gives when it's been holding tension for too long. The gunfire stopped. The enemy movement faded. The ridge fell quiet, as if the land itself was catching its breath with us. We regrouped, checked each other over, and confirmed we were all still standing. No one celebrated. In the teams, surviving isn't a celebration, it's an expectation. But what came after? The silence, the walk back, the thoughts none of us said out loud? That's where the real weight of the mission lived. Back at the FOB, we went straight into the post-action debrief. It's never emotional, never dramatic. It's factual, brutally factual. You replay the mission in slow motion, every mistake exposed under a microscope. And sitting at that table, surrounded by dust-covered men who had just faced the worst-case scenario, I learned the lesson that would shape everything I teach today. The first question asked wasn't about strategy, it wasn't about enemy movement, it wasn't even about the unexpected contact. The first question was directed at me. John, when did you know the team wasn't aligned? Not if, when. That question split me open because the truth was simple. I knew long before the first round cracked. The signs were there: hesitation, scattered communication, uncertainty. I saw them, I felt them, and I ignored them because I was managing the mission instead of leading the men. I answered honestly. I knew it during prep. I just didn't act on it. There was no judgment, no anger, just a quiet nod from the senior chief as he said, "That's how teams fail, not from what happens under fire, but from what leaders ignore before the first shot." That sentence stayed with me long after Afghanistan, long after the uniform, long after the teams, because it's the truth most people never hear. Leadership isn't tested when things are calm, and it certainly isn't tested when you feel ready. Leadership gets tested in the cracks, the tiny fractures that appear long before the collapse. As I sat there in that debrief room, listening to every misstep being dissected, I realized how close we had come to losing control again, not because the enemy was strong, but because leadership must be chosen every single moment. The second you stop choosing it, chaos fills the gap. That's the part civilians misunderstand. They think leadership is a skill you learn like coding or marketing or budgeting, but leadership is a decision, a choice you remake daily, sometimes hourly, a choice to take responsibility instead of waiting, a choice to speak clarity into confusion, a choice to step forward when every instinct tells you to step back. The mission ended that day, but the lesson didn't. I carried it into every role I held afterward, into coaching younger operators, into helping entrepreneurs, into guiding people who feel overwhelmed by their own lives. The principle never changes. Management controls tasks, leadership transforms people, and the truth is most people are stuck managing their lives, managing their days, managing their stress, managing their excuses, managing the chaos instead of leading through it. I don't tell this story to impress you. I tell it because the next moment of hesitation in your life, at work, at home, in your goals will either cost you clarity or give you control. The difference will come down to one decision. Will you manage the moment or will you lead it? Because leadership didn't end when that mission did. Leadership doesn't end when the pressure fades or the danger passes. Leadership is a choice you face again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. And if you want a life that moves forward with purpose, discipline, and confidence, then understand one thing: stop managing, start leading.